I want to talk a little bit about the concept of there are no two sides to this. We hear this echoed on social media. We hear people saying there are no two sides. And this is actually being echoed by people on both sides of the ideological spectrum. Many on the left view things in terms of oppressed versus oppressor. This is an obvious case where one group has way more power, Israel. And Israel, as the person in power, should take more responsibility. This is the narrative. With great power comes great responsibility. And Israel has not done much to change the status quo the past 10 plus years. Some would even say the past 30, 50, 70 plus years. Right? The one who holds the power has not done enough to bring about change. Now, I recognize that some will hear this and be like, of course Israel has tried to bring about change. I'm simply sharing the narrative of the side who views this as a simple oppressed versus oppressor. Israel has not done enough. They have the power, they have not done enough. The retaliation to Hamas, while is certainly not genocidal like much of the media and social media claims it to be, it does, though, cause harm to civilians. There's no denying that. Not only physical harm, but deep emotional harm it causes to civilians. Israel's approach to retaliation is to cause maximum infrastructural damage and to Hamas infrastructure, and maximum damage to Hamas personnel while minimizing civilian harm. But that being said, causing maximal infrastructural damage in a densely populated city like Gaza City causes civilian deaths. And it's true that Hamas purposely places headquarters and rocket pads in populated areas. When Israel kills Gazan children in airstrikes, that makes Hamas happy because it makes us look bad in the international community. This is part of their game, that's true. And it's not uncommon for Israelis or people who support Israel to see Israel's response as perfectly justified. But at the same time, given our power, given the collateral damage that our strikes cause, given the fact that it hasn't even been seen to weaken Hamas substantially, we need to be able to understand why the international community, why people are upset with this. They have every right to be concerned about civilians being killed. Yet, when we look at Hamas, Israel's enemy, they are a brutal enemy. They are intentionally shooting rockets at civilian populations. Their target is not to minimize civilian harm, it's in fact to maximize civilian harm. They have genocidal intentions. They refuse to recognize Israel's existence, right? This is the enemy that Israel is dealing with. So while one frames it as simply oppressed versus oppressor, the other frames it as a good guy who's just defending their people against a brutal terror organization. But in fact, both sides are speaking a certain truth. With great power comes great responsibility. And yet, Israel's enemy, Hamas, is a brutal one. And while the oppression of the Palestinian people is certainly relevant and should be of concern, them being oppressed does not, by default, justify anything and everything Hamas can ever do. And we see the international community being okay with this. And the Jews see it. The Jews see that rockets are shot at Israelis. People don't seem to care because they have the power, right? The framing of powerful versus weak kind of break down when you look at civilians. Do you think that a mother who loses her child in Israel to rocket fire feels better because she knows that her nation is powerful? No, a loss of life is a loss of life. And And the one-sidedness is how it's framed is troubling to many Israeli and many Jews around the world. Again, we must, in conflicts such as these complex conflicts, we must always try to understand both truths. And generally, it's not as simple as there are no two sides to this. Again, if anybody says there are no two sides to this, it is in fact simple. You can conclude from that that they are extremely biased and that they don't have a great grasp of the intricacies of this conflict. I'll leave it with that. We have a lot of work to do. Always try to learn both truths and reconcile between them two. It's not one or the other, it's both. Israel has great responsibility, yet Hamas must be held accountable. And just because Hamas is shooting rockets at Israel, that doesn't mean Israel can do whatever they want in response and not expect condemnation. That's not how it works. The world has every right to condemn Israel if they feel like their response is harming civilians.